Welcome to this presentation on the 4 key principles of phonics. It is vital that you understand these principles. If you don't, you will struggle to understand what is happening in seminars, any readings that you do on the nature of phonics, and more importantly, to understand the basis on which you are teaching children early reading through systematic synthetic phonics. Before going through the 4 key principles in the introduction, I just want to assure you that we will be going through key vocabulary, the key terms, as we go through each of the principles. So just to signpost where we're going, principle 1 is that phonemes, the sounds, are represented visually by letters. Principle 2, a phoneme can be represented by one or more letters. Principle 3, the same phoneme can be represented or spelt in more than one way. And principle 4, the same spelling may represent more than one phoneme. And we're going to cover each of those principles in this presentation. Although we're going to use the technical language associated with systematic synthetic phonics, this really is not that difficult to understand. The usual barrier to people understanding this is their own fear of understanding it, that they won't understand it. It is in fact very simple.
In July 2021, the Department for Education published the Reading Framework Teaching the Foundations of Literacy. Now, this publication does not include the 4 principles of phonics, as has been explored in multiple publications on the teaching and learning of phonics. However, it does include a summary statement, and it says the principles underpinning the teaching of phonics that teachers need to understand include understanding how the alphabetic code of English represents the sounds, phonemes, of the language with single letters and groups of letters, graphemes. And you can see embedded within that summary principles 2, a phoneme can be represented by one or more letters. Principle 3, the same phoneme can be represented or spelled in more than one way. And principle 4, the same spelling can represent more than one phoneme. You can't see principle 1, phonemes are represented visually by letters or graphemes, and that is a sort of foundational principle. So although the document does summarize the 3 principles that follow, that are about the decoding and encoding, the initial foundational principle that actually those squiggles that we see on pieces of paper represent sounds is omitted here. A couple of pages on from the summary statement, we find this list, and this list is being provided in relation to the way that English has borrowed words from other languages, which explains the complexity of English, and it's about the relationship of graphemes to phonemes. So we can see numbers 1, 2, 3, and number 1 grapheme usually represents a single phoneme. Well, that shouldn't be too shocking to read, because that's principle 2 from our 4 principles of phonics. A phoneme can be represented by one or more letters. Number 2 on the reading frameworks list is different graphemes can be used to represent the same phoneme. Now, our principle 3, the same phoneme can be represented or spelled in more than one way. There you go. And then number 3 on this list, a grapheme can represent different phonemes in different words. And that is another way of saying principle 4, which is the same spelling may represent more than one phoneme.
So first of all, our first key term is phoneme. And phonemes are the smallest unit of sound in any spoken language. You take any language that you hear someone speaking, those people will be using a set number of sounds to make all the words that they are speaking. And so we can take the spoken words that we use and we can break them down into phonemes. And in English, there are approximately 44 phonemes, and that word approximately is important because different theorists, different researchers have different answers to this, usually between 42 and 46, but some people would claim more. For most purposes, we can think of 44, and that's fine. When we write the sound that we're making, we use those 2 slashes for our notation. So here in the bottom line, this notation is used to indicate a phoneme, and you can see that is not the letter A, that is the sound A. And those two slashes indicate that. And here are the 44 phonemes, and they have been split up into consonants and vowels. If you don't know the difference between a consonant and a vowel, you need to look at the dedicated PowerPoint presentation on consonants and vowels. So here we have the 24 consonant phonemes, and remember we are thinking about the sounds, not the letters. We have those slashes there to indicate sound. So the phonemes are B, K, D, F, G, H, J, U, M, N, P, R, S, T, V, W, Y, Z, Sh, Ch, Th, Th, Ng, J. And the same for the vowel phonemes. And remember, we are talking about the sounds, not the letters. So although the letter vowels are A, E, I, O, U, there are many more phoneme vowels, the sounds that are vowel sounds. And again, that is explored in the dedicated presentation. So here are the vowel phonemes: A, E, I, O, A, E, I, O, U, ow, oi, ah, or, ear, ear, And phonemes can be in the initial position, the first position, the medial position, or the final position. So let's take s, a, t. And if we run those together, we have the word sat. S is the phoneme in the initial position, a is in the medial position, and t is in the final position. Our next key term is grapheme, and a grapheme is the written representation of a phoneme. Now, if you look at the next line, it says, for example, the letter C can be used to represent the sound k. However, letters are not always the same as graphemes. Letters are used to make graphemes, but we only have 26 letters in the alphabet, so sometimes we use them in combination. The point is that a grapheme represents a sound. So the notation used to indicate a grapheme is those inverted commas, as in the letter C above, or on the bottom line, the A. But you may also see the greater and lesser mathematical signs being used either side. Not very often, but it does happen. So just be aware. So principle 1. Phonemes are represented visually by letters, by graphemes, and in this case we are talking about letters as graphemes, individual letters, because we have the sounds for sat, the word sat, and the phonemes are s, a, t, and we know that the representation for that word, the written representation, is s, a, t. So s is the grapheme for s, a is the grapheme for a, t is the grapheme for the phoneme t. We've looked at the slashes, the forward slashes being used to indicate phonemes, but when we are writing a word down and we have the graphemes here, S-A-T, we need to indicate how they represent phonemes, how many phonemes are represented, so we can use sound buttons. So I put a dot under the S to indicate that that S makes the sound S. A dot under the A to indicate that A has one sound attached to it, A. A dot under the T to indicate that has one sound, T. S, A, T. There are 3 phonemes and 3 graphemes. There should always be the same number of graphemes as phonemes. But a phoneme can be represented by more than one letter, which is why it gets quite complicated. Because a grapheme then, if a phoneme can be represented by more than one letter, a grapheme can have more than one letter in it. So here is an example showing you that we can have a single letter as a grapheme. For the sound P, we have P in pan. The letter P represents the sound P. But if you then see puppet, you've got the first P is for the sound P, but the second use of the sound P in puppet is represented by two P's. The sound Ch is represented by two letters in the first example, chair, ch, ch, chair. But it can also be represented by three letters, as in patch, patch. The sound I, the phoneme I, can be represented in all those different ways there, with an IE, an IGH, just an I on its own. It can be represented by a Y. It can be represented by an I with an E separated from that I. The E turning the I, the short vowel, into an I long vowel. And IDA as an EI for that sound. So our next key term is digraph. And a digraph is a two-letter grapheme that represents one sound. And there are consonant digraphs and there are vowel digraphs. So let's look at the consonant digraph. It is a consonant digraph not because of the letters that are in it, but because of the sound that they represent. So the C and H, yes, they're both consonants, but when they are written together, we make the sound ch, ch, and ch is a consonant. So those two letters, making the single sound, are a consonant digraph. They make a consonant sound. Then if we look at the vowel digraphs, we have E as in eel, makes the sound E, but we can also have EA as in eat to make the sound E. And because they are making a vowel sound, E, it doesn't matter whether the letters themselves are consonants or vowels. The fact that they are making a vowel sound means that they are a vowel digraph. We can use those slashes to indicate sound, or we can use the sound buttons to indicate where the graphemes are and therefore where the phonemes should be heard. So let's start with pin. Pin. P, I, N. Three phonemes. And we have three letters. Remember, we need the same number of graphemes as phonemes. We have three letters, three phonemes, so it's one letter per grapheme. P for P, I for I, N for N. So the graphemes are P, I, N to make the phonemes P, I, N. This is different. Here we have chin, which has four letters in it. But if we sound it out, we have ch, I, N, only three phonemes. And remember, we need the same number of graphemes as we have phonemes. So let's look at the I and the N. I for I, N for N. One letter grapheme here. But if we look at the C and H together, then we have ch. And to show that we count them as one grapheme, which means they make one sound, we draw a line underneath. Another example. Ch is a consonant, but here we have a vowel. E, s, e, m. So we're using two letters to make that one sound E. There are four letters in the word, S, E, E, M. But there are only three phonemes, s, e, m. And so we need the same number of graphemes as phonemes. Again, single letter S for s, single letter M for m, but those two E's together make E, so we draw a line. So we have three graphemes, three phonemes. So here's an exercise. Think how many ways can you... Here are my examples. You may have different words, but hopefully you have come up with a single F, as in fall, double F, as in cliff, PH, as in photo, What about GH, as in laugh? L, R, F. You see how complex writing in English can be. But which of these are digraphs? So let's have a look. In looking at the F, we've got double F, PH and GH. We clearly have some examples of digraphs where two letters represent one sound. So I'm going to use sound buttons to show you. And you will see we have a consonant digraph also in double L. I wasn't actually asking you to find that, but it is there. We also have a vowel digraph in the AU, as in laugh, because the L is making L, AU is R, and the GH is making F, laugh. How many ways can you represent the sound A? Here are my examples. AI as in aid, AY as in play, the A on its own as in table, AE as in Sunday, EY as in pray, EIGH as in sleigh, EA as in break, and that A separated from the E in make. The two of them together, otherwise it would be Mac. How many of those, the examples I've given you there, are digraphs? Here I have given you the answers, and you have AI as a digraph, AY as a digraph. We've got AE as a digraph, EY as a digraph, EA as a digraph, but we also have in table the LE, T, A, B, ul. The ul sound is made by the L and the E together. But let's look at sleigh. We have EIGH. So EIGH is not a digraph. That is more than two letters making one sound. A digraph is two-letter grapheme. A trigraph is a three-letter grapheme. So we have got gatto there, fridge, fridge, and plaque, plaque. So those three letters making a single sound. And we have a tetragraph or a quadrigraph, but you're not often going to hear these words used. These are four-letter graphemes that represent one sound, as in the example before, sleigh, sleigh, or bow, bow. But what about this example here? It is two letters, but they're separated, or we could say they're split. So a split digraph or a split vowel digraph is a digraph where the two vowel letters are separated by a consonant letter. So we have got make, you have got the A, and then a consonant letter K, and then the vowel letter E following. And that turns the A sound into an A sound, so you go from short vowel to long vowel. So come up with some words that use each of those split digraphs. Here are my examples. I've got make, which is the example I gave before. Complete. About kite. Home. Muse. So how do we notate this so that people can see that we have this split digraph? Well, let's take make. Make. How many phonemes have we got? M, A, K. 3 phonemes. So we must show that there are only 3 sounds here, not 4. So we have our 3 sound buttons for the M, the A, and the K. M, A, K. But that A sound is not A, it's A. So we need to show that. Now there are different ways of doing this. Some people have the curve over, some people have it under. It doesn't matter. As long as it's clear that you are joining the A and the E to make one digraph, it's fine. And you must indicate that there are only 3 phonemes. M, A, K. only 3, not 4.
A quick word about terminology. Are we talking about a split digraph, or are we using the term magic E, which has been used for many years to describe the same thing? However, previous guidance in the training for the teaching of systematic synthetic phonics has said that we shouldn't use the term magic E, but the guidance from 2021, the Department for Education's reading framework, says that we should be prepared to use magic E if that is what a particular phonics scheme or phonics program or publication uses. We just need to be consistent. So if the materials we use with children talk about split digraphs, then they all need to refer to split digraphs. If they refer to magic E to mean the same thing, then they all need to refer to magic E. Consistency is the important thing.
Which brings us to our next key term, which is grapheme-phoneme-correspondence, or GPC. And this is the whole point of this process, is to learn what the letters do when we read them, what sounds we should make when we see those letters on the page. And that is what children are learning. They are learning the GPCs, the regular grapheme-phoneme correspondences, some of the less common ones as well, and then there are words which are sort of stand on their own, which we call tricky words, because they don't use regular grapheme-phoneme correspondences. The third principle, that the same phoneme can be represented or spelled in more than one way, is one that we have been using before already. We have actually been putting that principle into practice. It's very common among vowels, and you can see at the bottom, the table at the bottom, there are different ways that A, the AI sound can be, or the AY sound can be represented. And we did the exercise with A to make that point. So we're not going to dwell on that. We have already explored it. It is the third principle. You need to remember it, but we have already done that. The fourth principle, however, is that the same spelling can represent more than one phoneme. So here, if you look at the illustration at the bottom, you've got EA being used in 2 completely different ways to create different sounds. They are both vowel digraphs, EA, but in the first one it's making an E sound for head, ed, and the second one it's making an E sound for eat, eat. So children need to be able to see them in context and understand what is the more likely sound there. That they're not just reading out eed, but they see that combination of H-E-A-D. They're familiar enough with it within its context to know that it's actually, in this case, going to be an E sound. We are looking for children to develop automaticity in their reading, so that they shouldn't have to sound everything out, but they need to be aware that letters make different sounds depending on their context. So how many phonemes can the grapheme O-U-G-H, which is a tetragraph, represent? How many different sounds do you think O-U-G-H can represent in English? When you have your answer, go on to the next slide. Here are my examples. Ow, oo, o, or, or So bow, b-ow, through, th-oo, though, th-o, bought, b-ought, thorough, th-a-r. So finally, go through those 4 principles again. That phonemes are represented visually by letters, and those letters form graphemes. Principle 2, a phoneme can be represented by 1 or more letters. Principle 3, the same phoneme can be represented or spelt in more than one way. Principle 4, the same spelling may represent more than one phoneme. If you need to go over any bits of this presentation again, by all means go back. But You should now complete the online quiz or audit that accompanies this lesson. If you need to clarify any points, you can go back through this presentation. But also you could have a look at the notes of guidance for practitioners and teachers from Letters and Sounds, which is available in the resources section. It's a short document and it's very easy to read and gives a good introduction to systematic synthetic phonics.